Aston Villa have knocked Tottenham Hotspur out of the FA Cup after beating them by 2-1 in what was an extremely dominating display. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at how they did it. We're going to be explaining why it was so difficult for Tottenham to break down this Villa side. We're also going to be discussing how Aston Villa were able to carve through Tottenham at will. And we're going to be highlighting the key difference between the two sides that ultimately decided the game. The first half of the game is where it was won and lost. Aston Villa absolutely dominated it, but Spurs did come into the game with a new building pattern. Having Archie Gray drop back in between two splitting centre-backs meant that they were able to push Pedro Porro forwards, which had a knock-on effect for Odobert, and we can see that here. Odobert moves centrally, Simons moves across, and Palhinha just moves a little bit further ahead than Archie Gray. The idea behind this is to overwhelm the Aston Villa midfield, but also to get Palhinha a little bit higher, so if they do lose the ball, Palhinha's ability at counter-pressing and winning the ball back high means that they were able to then go again almost in a second phase. And this is what it ended up looking like. So you had Archie Gray with the ball and he looked to try and pass vertically forwards into the likes of Odobert, into Palhinha and into Xavi Simons. But they found a problem, and the problem was with the way that Aston Villa wanted to really defend. They looked to build and back themselves with a narrow 4-4-2 block, and it meant that when Tottenham wanted to go forwards, in particular through young Archie Gray in the centre of those two centre-backs, when he looked to try to go forwards, there were no passing options. Either the players in the centre of the park were marked, or they just didn't have the time nor the space to be able to find those pockets. And it meant that when Archie Gray tried to go forwards, he couldn't find those passes centrally, and he had to go out wide. But in going out wide, it meant that it offered more time for the likes of Maatsen or Cash to then go and press those wide wingers. It meant that Tottenham really weren't able to go through this Villa defence as much as they wanted to, or even if at all in certain scenarios, and it meant that the ball kept coming back towards them. It just didn't work at all. And this right here is a really good example of what I'm talking about. You've got young Archie Gray dropping back in between these two splitting centre-backs, and he's looking to play forwards, but what are his options? You've got João Palhinha just ahead of him, but can he play any other pass forwards? Well, the answer is no, because of the way that Aston Villa are condensing the pitch so very well. So he plays it forwards into João Palhinha, who now turns, essentially just a few yards ahead of where Archie Gray is, in the same role, now looking to play forwards. But again, the same problem is persisting. You've got Buendia following Odobert because he's moved centrally, and you've got Bogard onto Xavi Simons, stopping that passing lane. So again, the Tottenham player cannot play forwards. Really good from Aston Villa. Now, João Palhinha decides that he wants to go wide. The moment that he decides to go wide, just take a look at what's happening here. You've got a movement from Odobert, but it's being followed. You've got Xavi Simons not being able to be passed to, so it goes out wide. As this happens, look at this. This is incredible. You've got the really narrow Aston Villa core right here, preventing any kind of space for these Tottenham players. But because of Odobert drifting in field, yes, it might be something they want to do to try and overload the central areas, something that Aston Villa do on a number of occasions. Because of that, there is no overload out on that wing, which means that Maatsen is free as a bird to go and close down Pedro Porro in essentially a 1v1 situation. He's going to be joined by Buendia in not too long, and it means that Porro isn't comfortable with taking that battle, and he recycles it backwards. And then what have you got? You've got it going straight back to where it began, with Archie Gray. Tottenham needed to change something, but they didn't, and Aston Villa were pretty brilliant defensively. From an attacking point of view, though, Aston Villa didn't share any of Tottenham's problems. In fact, Villa were able to carve through Tottenham at will at times, and it was down to the way that they not only moved off the ball, but their willingness to take risks and play forwards. When they went forwards, what you tended to see was Tottenham drop back into a standard 4-4-2, something normal, something that Aston Villa do themselves, but it was a bit wider than Aston Villa's narrow 4-4-2, which meant there was space in between the lines. There was space in between the different players, which means that when Aston Villa wanted to go forwards, Maatsen pushing forwards, Buendia moving in field, John McGinn in this particular instance moved into the inside right channel as well, and Morgan Rogers went forwards. It meant that there was an overload in and around those Tottenham central areas, very different from what we saw with Aston Villa and Tottenham attacking. There was actually an overload in Aston Villa's favour, but in this particular instance, because of the way that Tottenham set up and because they didn't necessarily follow too many runners, you had an overload in Aston Villa's favour. And when you have players like Tielemans who are able to position themselves in correct areas, you're able to then allow them to turn, play the ball forwards, and that's how they started to really gain some momentum and really started to play through. But because of the way that they managed to overload the central area due to a lack of pressure on the ball and due to some really good movement, it meant that Villa were able to create chance after chance. And all of a sudden you had movement in between those different positions. You had the ability for them to find any kind of pass, and it was through that they were able to create a number of different really dangerous opportunities. Finding that space in between the midfield and the defence was absolutely crucial, and once you found that with enough time and space, especially with the time and space that Tottenham gave Aston Villa, it was only a matter of time before they were able to convert that into a very, very serious chance. And this is how Aston Villa's first goal comes about. This is how they were able to really carve through this Tottenham defence. But there are also some really important tendencies that we need to note, and it starts right here. You've got Konsa on the ball right now. Matty Cash is tucked in. That's because Maatsen is being able to go forwards, and you've got Yuri Tielemans and Bogard in the centre of the pitch. Notice their positions. They're just behind the Tottenham forwards, but in front of those Tottenham midfielders. Now notice the distance between the Tottenham midfielders and the Aston Villa midfielders. Now look at the distance between the midfielders of Aston Villa and the forwards. It's too wide, which means that when the ball gets pushed into Tielemans, there isn't enough time for either Archie Gray or Joao Palhinha to start to press. Remember what we saw with those Aston Villa midfielders. They were close, they were tight, they were cutting away those passing lanes. That's not available here. And because that's not available, it allows Yuri Tielemans to do this. Turn. He picks up the ball with one instance, swivels, and then is able to play another vertical pass directly through the heart of this Tottenham midfield. This is something that should not happen. It should not be allowed to happen. But at the same time, you've also got Buendia right here next to the referee. He's making a movement. And this is another key and crucial point in creating opportunities for your own side. You need to be able to move. In moving, it creates space. It drags players away, which naturally gives these Aston Villa players the space that they have. A number of people always look at Aston Villa and think, why have they got so much time and space? They're continuously moving, continuously creating that space. So the moment the ball goes into John McGinn, they then go. They now have time. They now have space. And at this point, it's too late because Mickey van der Ven jumps and he's looking to press. Palhinha looks to press now. They are now really concerned, but it's far too late because now Marlon has enough space. Now Buendia has some space, and it's danger time for Tottenham. The ball goes into Marlon, and Pedro Porro makes another mistake. He goes wrong side. He doesn't get the ball, and in doing so, he vacates his right back slot. You've also got Morgan Rogers on this close side, which is closest to us, because of Davies tucking in due to Mickey van der Ven chomping and really biting at that chance. You've now got space for Rodgers. It's opened up this Tottenham defence. Again, this wouldn't happen for Aston Villa because of the way they pressurise the ball. They pressurise the players that they're marking. None of that here for Tottenham, and Aston Villa take full advantage of it. It's so good. So as the ball goes into Buendia, it's now about whether he's got the composure to finish. He obviously does. It is a brilliantly crafted goal, but the way that Aston Villa are managing to really carve through this Tottenham side is due to the way that they're able to take that risk and play forwards, but also they move for each other. That's the key difference between these two sides, the ability to play forwards and the ability to move and create space for each other. A brilliant goal. Villa's second comes from Tottenham not being able to play through them yet again. A wayward pass by Matisse Tell. In fact, no Tottenham player apart from Xavi Simons, who had more than 10 passes as an outfield player, had a passing accuracy of over 90%. To put that into context, Aston Villa had 4. Now, that is just an example of how much better Villa were at being able to progress the ball and find their teammates. And that's exactly what Bogard does right here. He finds finds Morgan Rogers. But as he finds Morgan Rogers, and as the ball goes away from this Aston Villa right-hand side, the Tottenham left-hand side, look at Matisse Tell, looking at the ball, but look at how much space Marlin's now moving into. He's drifting into that space. Obviously, he gets found. The moment he gets found, remember what I spoke about a little bit earlier. Aston Villa's players move for each other. They create space for each other. This is the key difference between Aston Villa and between themselves and Tottenham. This is it. You've got Matty Cash right here. Watch this. This is the most important, or one of the most important movements in this entire build-up. Matty Cash makes a blindside run behind Ben Davies and in front of Mickey van de Ven. This drags away Van de Ven and creates the space between the midfield and the defence. Obviously, it gets played through into that channel, into that space, and if you look at where the ball is going, that's where Mickey van de Ven would be if it wasn't for that brilliant, selfless run by Matty Cash. Now you've got Buendia and Morgan Rogers running onto the ball. This is an unbelievable touch by Buendia. The vision, the understanding, the awareness, and the willingness to pass it over, to lay it over to his teammate. Morgan Rogers takes it brilliantly and obviously finishes with excellence. But it highlights the key difference between these two sides. Spurs put in a spirited second half performance where they really do try to bounce back against Aston Villa. They raised the tempo of the game that was controlled by Villa in that first half, and it culminates in this moment, winning the ball back by Randall Colomuani and then able to drive forwards, taking that space and then finding Odobert out on that right hand side. The Spurs fight back really was looking to gain some momentum, especially through the likes of Xavi Simons and Joao Palhinha, but it was later on into the game, after that round about 20-minute spell, that you felt like Villa were always going to come back into it, and that's down to the real passing triangles that they managed to create, using a good amount of movement, the movement that we spoke about off the ball, to really drive them forwards, making those movements not only infield but also outfield, to then find themselves into different pockets of space and create different opportunities. It was through this that Villa were always a threat and always looked like they were going to convert another opportunity. And it's moments like these that make you think that Villa are always going to cause a threat because of how well drilled they are and how well they move through each other to create space and create passing lanes for each other. Bogard has the ball right here and he's going to pass over towards Matty Cash at the top of your screen. Look at the positioning of Buendia though, just moving in field, and Ollie Watkins is now making a movement in beyond. Notice the positioning of Davies trying to pressurise Buendia. Ollie Watkins is going to use that space and drive forwards. So as this goes over to Matty Cash, you've now got, again, more passing triangles. You've got the ability for Cash to find Buendia, and Ollie Watkins is stretching that play. The moment that Buendia gets the ball, you've now, again, got Mickey van de Ven biting. He's going to play it over towards Watkins, Buendia is, and you've got an inside run from Matty Cash. Look at the movement. This is the key difference. We keep saying it. It's so important between these two sides. And now you've got Ollie Watkins creating a really good pass for that run from Matty Cash. It's so well done, and obviously it gets pulled back into the box. It could be crossed in towards the back post as well. So many different opportunities, so many different avenues, and this really should have been converted. And in fact, after the 72nd minute, Tottenham actually didn't manage to have a shot on goal. Villa were the more dangerous side. They were the side that dominated for large parts in this game, and they deserved to go through. It was a brilliant performance by them. But of course, guys, I want to know what you think in the comment section below, so please do get involved and do let me know. What did you make of Tottenham? What did you make of Aston Villa? Let me know. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope to see you in the next one. But until then, my friends, take care.